SMU stirring the pot. Will they become the next big rivalry for Boston College? I'll tell you why.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. Thank you all for joining us on today's show. UNC to leave the ACC, why the newest tea leaves are not looking good. What about 8 ACC games versus 9 ACC games? I'll tell you why I think 8 is the best fit for Boston College in the conference. And SMU quarterback Kevin Jennings is stirring the pot. Will BC become a rival with the Mustangs? I'll tell you why in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Today's episode, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins with FanDuel. All right, let's kick this off. ACC Media Day kicked off on Tuesday, and we heard from Jim Phillips, but there was more details and some controversy, if you will. Kicking up from Boston College and one of their bigger rivals or teams that they're facing, the SMU Mustangs. Now, BC and SMU have only played twice in their history, but already there's this feeling, and it's a realistic feeling, that there's a rivalry brewing between these two schools. Now, you look at the two schools, it makes a little bit of sense. Both are kind of upper class. SMU has got a lot of money. BC's got a lot of money. And then you look at the games. Last two games they played, the Fenway Bowl and last year at SMU, have been very, very close. So Kevin Jennings and another secondary player for the Mustangs, I forget his name already, and I'm already blanking on it. They talked about BC in this rivalry when it came to the ACC Media Days. I want to shout out Graham Dietz for the transcription for this. BC, SMU is new to the conference. They don't really have any in-ground, like down to the earth rivals. BC has Syracuse. Syracuse doesn't really care much about BC, but it'd be really nice to have a good rival. I think SMU really hits that key. And SMU, they feel the same way. They talked a little bit, about this rivalry. It's been a game. So it's his name is Nakwobia. His last name is Nakwobia. And I think he's a secondary player. We were at home against BC this year, and we were right by our student section. I remember this being the first time in my experience at SMU that I could hear the players right next to me on the field. I'm like, man, I can't hear my teammate. It was pretty cold, whatever, but they're a good team. I've said all along that I predict that Boston College, their big upset this year is going to be SMU. And I'm sticking with my prediction there. But it's really cool because I think this is great. Hey, SMU is new. They're a good team. Obviously, they made the college football playoffs last year. Nothing to knock them at all. But to think about BC getting another team that feels like they're rivals and is actually going to play them, this is a good thing for the school and for both programs. Because now you're going to get to November and BC is going to play Kevin Jennings, who feels like this is a good rivalry. And this is going to stir up some interest. Now, I want to make sure that I make this clear. Kevin Jennings said nothing derogatory. This isn't like Tommy Castellanos going out there and blasting a team like Alabama. He didn't say anything like this. It was all respect from everybody on SMU towards BC. I'm saying this because it was something BC related, and I'm sure Graham was probably the one asking them all these questions about BC, but credit to him for doing that. But SMU has a lot that they're going to want to build on from last year. They've got a quarterback. Kevin Jennings is awesome. If you missed last year's game, you're missing a quarterback that is really special. Now, he did not look great in the playoffs. If your only experience of watching Kevin Jennings was they played Penn State and they got smoked, then you're not going to feel the greatest about him. But watch him in any other game. Watch him against BC. I thought going into this game, especially after watching him in the Fenway Bowl, this was going to be a quarterback that was just going to be a running quarterback, that he didn't have much of an arm, and he shut me up right away. This guy's got a good arm. He didn't really run at all against BC. It was all his arm, and he did a great job at that. But I also want to say this. This is not a knock on SMU, but even as good as SMU was, a playoff caliber team that made the ACC championship to lose to Clemson, BC had them on the ropes last year. They're not on the ropes, but they had them down to the wire. If BC was just a tad more talented on the offensive side of the ball, they would have won that game. Now, they ended up losing by multiple scores, but that's only because BC failed to move the ball with Grayson James at the end of that game. If BC kept moving that, it would have been a one-score game, or they would have won. And that was on the road. This was in Dallas. This year, BC plays in November at Chestnut Hill. This is going to be a big-time game. And I am looking forward to the fact that SMU is kind of helping build this as something more of a rivalry. Because on Thursday, when Bill O'Brien talks to the press, he's not going to say anything. The team's not going to say anything. But SMU, just the fact that they said this, that'll give us a little bit to add to this fire, to add to this rivalry that really should build up. Because you're going to have your Syracuse, you're going to have your Pitts, but it's also great to have a rivalry with some of the newer teams. I feel like Stanford will be a good one too, because Stanford, they're a little bit different in terms of the education they give, but they're a similar profile to BC just across the coast. So I thought this was great. I loved hearing SMU bring up Boston College, because you don't hear at ACC Media Days BC brought up all that much. All you hear about is Clemson. You hear about Florida State. You hear about Miami. And this was a chance for them. And speaking of Miami, what was Carson Beck wearing? I mean, man, he really, really embraced the Miami culture real fast. But that was the first day of this. Now, there's a few other things that came up from Media Day, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. In a second, I want to get into the ACC schedule. Jim Phillips brought up a new concept that could come up where the ACC could go up to 9 conference games. Is this a good idea or a bad idea? Will it happen? Won't it happen? I'll have my thoughts on all of that in just a moment. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get on the game with your friends who are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups with the Boston Red Sox, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. With Garrett Crochet pitching for the Red Sox, man, every time he goes out there, I'm hitting the Red Sox every time. And when Walker Buehler is pitching, I'm going against him. Just the way I've been working with it. But if you're new to FanDuel, it's easy to use. It's got fast payouts. It makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So you got to check it out. I've used it. It's very easy. I love using FanDuel to make my sports betting. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get yourself started. Locked on Boston College, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade, and I'm glad that you're here to talk about Boston College sports. If you're looking for a free daily Boston College podcast, you are in the right spot. We're available 5 days a week on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Jim Phillips, I went over some of the big talking points on yesterday's show about everything he brought up. But one thing I did not get into was a question he was asked about the amount of conference games the ACC plays. Now, the Big Ten, they play 9 conference games. The SEC is at 8, and there's been chatter about the SEC playing 9 games because, it matters more. I don't know. But the ACC is, trying to keep up with the Benjamins here. And so the question was asked, will the ACC ever go to 9 conference games? And Jim Phillips brought up some good points. He said, we're really happy with 8 conference games because it gives us the opportunity to schedule out good out-of-conference schedules. And you look at who some of these teams are playing. Clemson's playing LSU. Miami's playing, I believe, TCU. Florida State's playing Alabama. Even Boston College is playing Michigan State, which is good for, a good peer program for Boston College. This ability to add those games when you already have for BC, a G5 school like UConn, Notre Dame, and a FCS school, it makes scheduling flexibility that much easier. So Jim Phillips said he likes that, and I agree with him here. Like, the ability for that fourth spot to go out to any amount of schools is really beneficial for the freshness of your schedules and the ability to add those fresh matchups that maybe you wouldn't be able to have. I look at what BC has moving forward, and I've said before, I'm not the biggest fan of scheduling murderers rows like Ohio State, who I still don't think is going to play BC, Alabama, who I don't know why BC scheduled that, and, schools like that. But schools like Mizzou, Michigan State, Vanderbilt, Purdue, those types of schools, adding those games are good. BC should be adding schools that are their peer level. And, for the folks that are going to tell me, AJ, they should be, if you want to win, you got to beat the big boys. You're not understanding the way college football is right now. BC is about 1 million light years away from Alabama. They should not be playing Alabama. I just don't believe they should, because they're not anywhere near where they need to be. And unless Jack Butler is going to change how that goes, BC is going to be in a world of hurt when they play them. But when they play at Michigan State, when they play Mizzou, you can win those games. That's where that flexibility happens. Now, Jim Phillips also said that he's thinking about, if the SEC changes to 9 games, then we're flexible of doing that. And that's fine. That's okay, because you want to be able to do what everyone else is doing. And so I'm glad to hear that he's not just wedged into this mind frame where we're stuck at 8 games. But if it happens, we can go to 9. Right now, the way scheduling works in college football and the way it works with ACC football, you have so many teams and you have an odd number of ACC teams. It just makes it weird because, again, you're going back to almost that mode where you're not going to see some teams for a little while. And adding a 9th game would kind of alleviate that. Now, I know what you're thinking where you're listening to this. AJ, if you go to 9 games, just get rid of the SCS games. And I say that's a point, but the counterpoint is, and you need to hear this, is if you get rid of FCS games against the FBS, it is going to decimate those programs. And if you're okay with them all going away, and some of you don't care, and you really need to have I feel like we should all have a bigger outlook of how this whole ecosystem works. If they all go away, that's going to be a ton of players that are going to disappear, that you'll never be able to see. And that's not a good thing. FCS football absolutely needs those bye games. Fordham this year, the money that they're making off of that BC game is so critical to the athletic department. They'll never say it, but that's the way it works. These teams make anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million for these games where they don't even look competitive. So I'm a little worried about just taking that away, because that's just going to kill FCS football. And it's not just going to kill FCS football. Think about all those other programs that will rely on that money as well. That's a big deal. And if you're just a capitalist who doesn't care, all the power to you. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit more sentimental on how this all works, that I don't want to see a bunch of guys that could end up, transferring up, lose all that opportunity in all these other programs. But if you're just saying that's the way it works, all the power to you. I guess that's what you want to believe. But I don't think that's good. I just don't think killing that part of the ecosystem is a good thing for college football. And that's what going to 9 games may do. And you could say the same thing for any of those games. You could also say kill off the G5 game. And I would say that's even worse, because BC gets the chance to play Army, UMass, UConn, Navy, some of these teams that you love seeing come to Boston College that honestly you have sort of rivalries with, UConn and UMass, they sell a lot of tickets to those games. And to just get rid of those again because you want 9 games, for up here, it's a tough sell. So I'm cautious about that 9 games system because I do think it does kind of take that college football ecosystem and throw it in a mixer. And not always is that a good thing for the way things are working right now. And if that's the way college football is going, then c'est la vie. That's the way things of college football is working. But I want to believe that you want to make things happen for as many teams as you can. Because the more teams you leave behind, the more exclusive this makes, and it's not what college football is about. Yeah, it's great to see Alabama. It's great to see Texas and Ohio State and Michigan. But it's also great to watch some of those crazy games that you see, like MACtion on Tuesday nights or Pac-12 on After Dark. To just get rid of all these weird games is going to get rid of all that. So this is just an example of that. But getting up to 9 games will make all that kind of disappear, and I don't want to see that happen. Now, in a moment, we're feeling good about the way the ACC is looking, but a new article on the 247 UNC site makes it sound like the dominoes are already falling already for the conference to fall apart. I'll get into all of that in just a moment. This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. Thank you all who have been everydayers. If you listen to this podcast every day, I want to thank each and every one of you. If you are not an everydayer, we have 5 shows a week. You can find it on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Go back and listen to them. They're 20 minutes each. You can get into everything Boston College. Get all your news, get your insight, get my takes on things on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want a second listen, check out Locked On ACC with Kenton Gibbs and Alex Dono. They're down at ACC Media Days, and they got the latest of what's going on down there. Now, speaking of ACC Media Days, 247's UNC channel had an article up that really showed that the ACC is not as tightly bound as some may think. And many of you are going, AJ, I thought it was gone anyways. And you may be right. But it made it sound like UNC is another team that could be leaning towards the door. And the reason they're talking about this is because now that Clemson and Florida State have found basically a way to get out of this grant of rights, to be able to get out of this contract that would have bound them to the ACC to 2035, other schools are going to start looking at that too. And the way that it's continuing to sound, it could be happening a lot sooner than folks are saying. I've heard people say as early as 2027 if they can afford it. So we're hearing Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, go and talk about how important it is that the conference is together, that the conference is feeling finally unified. You don't hear much out of Clemson. You don't hear much out of Florida State, but now it's another school. So I continue to use the dam and the dike metaphor. That we now have the fingers in for Florida State and Clemson, and there's a gushing geyser now of UNC. Now, this is all just on one report, and I trust the guys over at UNC 247. But are we already looking at a conference that's going to fall apart? I'm not sure. I have been one that has been really skeptical about all this. Everyone's just going to leave and they're going to find new places. And this is all going to change because I don't think it's as simple as that. In order to take on schools, the media partners are going to have to want to pay for those schools. And I'm not sure Fox or NBC or ESPN or whatever, whoever's going to take these schools on, want to spend the $60, $70 million to get UNC. Like, think about that for a second. Just think for a second logically. Is UNC football, which I know they have a good basketball team, but is their football is the driving market for a lot of this? Are they worth what's it going to be, $63 million or whatever in a couple of years? UNC football? No, they're not. So they can talk and they can bang their chests and tell you what kind of brand they are and how great the Jordan brand is and They got Bill Belichick and, all this great stuff. But at the end of the day, when the media partners sit down, are they going to really want UNC? I'm skeptical of that. I'm not sure that that's the case. Okay. Yes. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to get into my responding to trolls before they get into my mentions comments. I understand I cover Boston College sports. I'm glad that you can tie your shoelaces. Yes. I'm not talking about BC right now. I'm talking about UNC. Now go pat yourself on the back and get out of my comment section. Now, when we're talking about UNC, we're looking at what they could provide on the football field. And UNC, for the most part, is no better than Boston College. They're a little better, but really, let's be realistic, they're not. And maybe they're going to look at them for basketball. Maybe I'm completely off base, and it's the basketball property that's more important than baseball. I'm not really sure baseball is going to be really moving that needle, but I am just thinking a lot of these schools, whether it's UVA, UNC, Miami, they're pounding their chests because they want to showcase what their brand is worth. And in reality, it's not as much as you think. I look at Clemson. Clemson is the marquee brand of the ACC. They are a team that can pound their chest and tell you everything that's great about them. You know what? They back it up on the field. I think Florida State is right there. But when I watch Tommy Castellanos lose by 40 to Alabama this year, I'm not sure they're going to be there this year either. So I look at, I think the teams that are going to run to the door are not as many as you think. They may want to run to the door, but when they open the doors, they're going to be anyone there saying, hey, sign this check, because I don't think they're going to be there. I think this is a interesting proposition, but I still think there's more dominoes to fall. Do I think the ACC will be this way in 5 years? No. I do not think the ACC will be the same as it is right now. Do I think the ACC will be the next G5 school? No, I don't think that either. But I do think the mass exodus, what was it, the Serious 5 or whatever, I forget what they're, Significant 5, I don't know what they were called last year, something 7. I don't think they are going to all just leave because I don't think there's enough partners to take them on. They're going to give them more money. I just don't. So I think in a few years, we'll see where college football is at. I don't think it's going to be the same. And I've said all along, I don't think it's just going to be an exodus out of the ACC. I think that the Big Ten is going to see some schools that are going to be like, hey, why is Maryland and Rutgers getting the same amount of money as Ohio State and Michigan? Boom. Why is, some of these schools like Mississippi State get the same amount of money as Georgia and Alabama? Boom. I think that could happen too. So we'll see where this all kind of plays out. Now, on tomorrow's show, we're going to hear from Bill O'Brien, Lewis Bond, Davion Crouch, Logan Taylor, and KP Price. What do they talk about? Are there any big news items to talk about for BC? I'm sure there's going to be. And we'll have it all here on Friday's show of Locked On Boston College, your team every single weekday. And so check us out there. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. I'm available as well on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, MySpace, Friendster, all the networks. I'm available on everything. You know the network. I am there. Just look up AJ Black, Eagle Insider, or Locked On BC. I'm not going to get them all, but I'm going to start putting them in the show notes starting tomorrow so that you can find me easily wherever you get your social media needs. And make sure to follow us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you all for following along. I'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every